Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet Earth. This is your host, Rebecca Jernigan, and you are listening to Journeys with Rebecca right here on wolfspiritradio.com and also on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, Studio B. It's a great night. And please remember that both Wolf Spirit and Freedom Slips are listener supported, so please, any donations really do make a difference. It allows for the host and their guests to continue to provide the best and latest information. And of course, it's not always mainstream. And please don't forget to visit my website, journeyswithrebecca.com, and check out the archives, which, by the way, most of them have been moved to the YouTube channel, which there's a link right there on the archive page. I still have quite a few more years to put up, but the most recent ones are up there. They're also on my website. You can set up an appointment. I do have some newly revised sessions and the mentorship program that will certainly assist in the new energies are available. I have one opening left. Payment plans are available, and there's always the free newsletter to sign up, or you can follow me on Twitter and or Facebook, or all of it. And one quick announcement about myself before I get into tonight's guest is my book, Night Experiences, Visions, and Prophecies, has finally arrived, and it is available on Amazon on Kindle version for the moment. Hopefully by the end of this week, if not before the end of this week, it will be available for print copy. I've been having a little bit of issues with the layout on it for the print copies, but those should be available. I do hope that you will definitely partake of the book. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's gorgeously illustrated to bring the words to life. I can't thank my illustrator enough, Maggie. She has done a fabulous job. I hope you will enjoy it. I'm pretty sure that you will, and then I've already started working on my next book. So those announcements will be coming out fairly soon. And tonight I do have a really fantastic guest. I had an opportunity to speak with him very briefly earlier today. I know you are really going to enjoy him. His name is Brent Michael Phillips, and he's here to share with us his book in a series of 3 called The Formula for Miracles. Now, this is where science reveals the secret of spirit. It bridges the gap between the worlds of science and spirituality by explaining the real science used by healers, mystics, self-help gurus, and miracle workers to manipulate and bend the fabric of reality itself. Now, we're going to begin our conversation tonight with Brent sharing his personal journey to his point of discovery and what has happened since that time, as well as sharing a lot of information that is going to be valuable to everyone, no matter where you're at in your own personal journey here. I know you're going to have questions for our guest tonight, so please do remember to place any questions that you have in the chat room in all caps so that we can get those answered for you right on air. There is a possibility, not a probability, but a possibility that Brent may not be able to be with us for the whole entire 2 hours. So if you do have questions, make sure you don't hold off too long to get those put into the chat room so that we can get those answered for you. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Brent Michael Phillips. Hi, Brent.
Hey, it's great to be here. This is exciting.
Well, good. It's exciting for me, and it's exciting for all the people. And I have to tell you, one of the things I didn't share with you when we chatted is that these shows are going to be up on YouTube, so they're going to stay there. So, if people didn't get an opportunity to see or hear the show live, they will be able to go back in and listen to it again, or listen to it later, or again if they want to listen to it a second or third time. So it will be made available to them on YouTube as well. So that's going to be fantastic.
Very cool.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your journey, because your journey. Listen, when I first opened up the book, and I seriously, I probably get hundreds of books sent to me every year. People wanting to be on the show, and they have written fabulous books. So I sat down to read your book, and I started reading the first part of it, and I was like, well, I think this is my story. Like he's writing about me. Hey, this is just crazy. I mean, I've had similar situations, and I know from all the years that I've been on the show and the people that have, emailed me and kept in contact with me, and all the beautiful audience members as they, chit chat back and forth in the chat rooms here. Many people have had similar experiences in their life. Matter of fact, there's probably not too many people that either you or I know that haven't went through some kind of a healing situation or a sickness, injury, illnesses, whatever the case may be in their life cycle. And so I think this is a very apropos book, and I love the fact that we're bringing science and spirituality together, because that's how I've always viewed it. You know, as energy is energy, and we have to be able to figure out how to, you know, get in there and really work with it. And as it's not our enemy, that's part of who we are. So I was really kind of blown away just by the very first part of it in your own personal story. So because this is your first visit here, and I know I'm talking 100 miles a minute, I don't know, I think somebody slipped, some ginkgo or something in my tea or something here. I want you to, though, kind of go back and kind of talk to people and share your own life experience and how you went through this process, because I know you started the process. By the way, I love the fact that you're a geek. You were a geek.
Still am.
All right. Love the geek. Gotta love the geek. Because that's how I look at our brain, in a sense, is that it's the computer and it's what we program in it, right?
That's
so
exactly
I'm
right.
just anxious to really get started in this, because there's just so many things that we can pull out for people and really make it look logical, and it's just filled with common sense, and it just makes sense. So if you will, just start telling your story, because it really is fantastic.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I want everyone to know, first thing, that I am the first to admit that I never thought I'd be doing anything like this. To be a professional healer, a spiritual teacher, teaching people how to see energy and create miracles wasn't even on my radar, because I grew up pretty much as your typical nerd. You know, when I was in high school, some of you might have picked on me. I mean, I loved video games and Star Wars and Star Trek and played Dungeons and Dragons and the whole 9 yards. And
cool.
So, still do, in fact. Still do.
Yeah. Every once in a while I do the same.
I got some serious nerd cred. And when I went to college, it was a pretty easy decision on what I wanted to do, because the one thing that I was good at and could get paid for was programming computers. And so I ended up in college at MIT, and at MIT I discovered the Internet. And of course, that sounds funny today, but back in the 80s, no one had ever heard of the Internet.
Right.
And so when I was introduced to it, I thought, wow, you know, this worldwide computer network, this is a game changer. And I knew that it was going to change our world in ways we couldn't even imagine back then. And so, long story short, I went through MIT. I continued on there in graduate school. When I was in grad school, I got involved with what's called today the World Wide Web Consortium. But I am very proud to be one of the people that created what today is the modern Internet. You know, lots of cool stuff I worked on. One of the projects was in 1994. It was my group that sent the first ever live video over the web.
Ooh. Well, by the way, thank you for helping with the Internet.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And so I was working on my PhD, and then the Internet boom hit. And I figured, well, heck, you know, this is literally, I figured this was the gold rush of my generation. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because I found myself in grad school at MIT as one of the world's leading Internet experts right at the start of the Internet boom. And so I figured, well, heck, this will be easy. I'll move to California, recruit some friends, maybe do a startup company, work really hard for a couple of years, and sell it for millions of dollars. So that was my plan. And there's that old joke you may have heard. What's the easiest way to make God laugh?
Go ahead.
You just tell him your plans.
Yeah, there you go.
And so things got off to a pretty good start. I recruited my lifelong best friend. We started a website design company. And in the first year, we did a lot of really amazing work for Fortune 500 companies. I did the very first website for the launch of the Sony PlayStation in the summer of 1995. I did the very first website for Disneyland. I did the first website for Nissan Motors. So we were doing some really cool high-profile work. A year later, I had 15 people working for me. And I thought, hey, you know what? I'm living the dream, right? Yeah, well, yeah. That's when everything started to go off the rails. And so, long story short, I was so driven to succeed. I wanted to be successful so badly that I was willing to do whatever it took. And so I was working literally just about every week, somewhere between 80 and 100 hours, because I just wanted to be successful. And so I was there from early morning to late night, 7 days a week, no weekends, no vacations, no holidays. It was just work. And after a couple of years of this, my body started to break down. I started to have some real problems with my health. It started off small. My wrist felt stiff and I had some pain in my neck and shoulders. And then one day it hit me like a ton of bricks, where I remember walking out to get into my car at the end of another long workday, and my hand was shaking so bad I couldn't get the car door open. And so I thought, okay, maybe something's wrong. But I didn't panic because I figured, well, heck, I'll go to the doctors and they'll be able to fix me up and I'll be fine in no time. Well, long story short, I spent 3 years in conventional therapy, and I didn't get better. I got worse. And I slowly worked my way up the food chain. I was, for almost 3 years, spending 10 hours a week at the Curlin Job Center, which is one of the top physical therapy clinics in the world, where they send the Olympians and professional athletes.
Mm-hmm, I've heard it, yep.
And I just got worse. I was in so much pain, I had to move in with my parents, because some days I hurt so bad I needed help just eating food. I literally could. Some days I couldn't even, hold a knife and fork. It got so bad that I couldn't even drive for more than 10 minutes at a time. Mm-hmm. Because just holding the steering wheel became so painful, I'd have to pull over and rest in order to drive. And so this wasn't a little tingle in my wrist. This was like life-wrecking pain.
Yeah.
And after 3 years of treatment, I finally got in with an appointment with the head doctor there, one of the top orthopedists in the world. And I was so excited because I figured, wow, this top guy, you see him they talk about him on TV all the time in the sports shows. And I'm like, wow, if anybody knows how to fix me, it'll be him, right? Mm-hmm. And so I remember going into his office, and my hopes were sky high. I'd finally get out of pain, finally find the solution. And I remember he was sitting behind his desk, and he's, had a pile of my medical files in front of him. And he slowly just adjusted his glasses and looked up at me and said, "I'm sorry, son, but there's nothing I or a doctor can do for you. You're always going to be in pain and you'll never be able to work again." And I was like, what? And I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say. And the last thing he said before they led me out of his office was, "Tell me, son, is there someone that can take care of you until you die?"
Oh, my gosh.
And I was 27 years old.
Oh, my gosh.
At 27, I was put on permanent disability, which is very rare for someone that young.
Yes.
I was told there was no hope I could ever recover. And they actually told me, please don't come back. We can't be wasting our resources on hopeless cases. So,
well, now, wasn't that just a cheery visit?
Yep. So that was devastating. Right after that, my partners, after I told them what had happened, I expected that my partners would be supportive of me, say, "Hey, Brent, we'll work this out." Instead, I walked in the next day. I was fired from my position at the company, even though I was one of the founders. Mm-hmm. And I also found out that my lifelong best friend and business partner had been secretly dating the woman I was crazy in love with.
Oh, whoa. Yep. Wow,
so
that is just a wow, dude, in less than 24 hours?
Yeah, all happened at once. And not too long after that, I found out that they had gone behind my back and sold the web company that I had founded for millions of dollars.
Oh, my.
And offered me essentially almost nothing. And so it was, as they say, a true dark night of the soul where everything fell apart.
Wow.
I was in pain. I couldn't work. I was told I could never recover. I had lost my multi-million-dollar company that my best friend had stolen from me. And I had suffered what was probably the worst heartbreak of my life. And so, I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I was fortunate that I didn't get stuck in the negativity for too long, because I had a friend of mine turn me on to positive thinking. And, back in the 90s, we called it positive thinking. Today, we call it law of attraction. It's really the same stuff. And he said, hey, Brent, when life's really got you down, when you don't know where to go, when everything seems hopeless, that's when you really need positive thinking. And so, long story short, I became this gung-ho positive thinking warrior. And I went to a couple weekend seminars, and I dance on the stage and high-five everybody and shout out how I was a millionaire. And I did vision boards, and I said my mantras 108 times a day, put power words on my walls, joined a mastermind group, and all that good stuff.
Right.
And long story short, my life didn't get better. It got worse. And there were reasons for that. I learned many years later that I had contracted Lyme disease when I was at MIT on a camping trip. Only took me 14 years to figure that out. I also learned, again, years later, I had been suffering from severe neurological damage from aspartame poisoning.
Oh, wow, yeah. I read
because
that in the book.
I used to be a huge Diet Coke addict.
Right.
And plus I had been born with a genetic neurological disorder. So you put all that together, I was wiped out. It was almost hopeless. And so after, about 9 months of positive thinking that didn't help, I gave up on that. And I had another friend of mine turn me on to alternative medicine. And you know what? I grew up in a culturally pretty conservative area. And what my parents had always taught me was that, well, alternative medicine is for people who were too dumb or too cheap to go to real doctors. And so that's what they taught me, right?
Oh, my. Yep.
But at this point, I was desperate, so I was willing to give it a shot. And, again, long story short, I spent 5 years as a full-time patient, living with my parents, scraping by on disability. All I did was go around and get treatment. And I did everything you can imagine. I went and I got acupuncture and I took herbs and I had osteopathic work done and craniosacral and deep tissue work and ergonomics retraining. I went to homeopaths and I did all these different cleanses and body detoxes. I tried special diets. I took all different kinds of supplements to try to combat inflammation and fatigue and, on and on and on. I had a whole closet full of all these different devices and gadgets. I had electric stems and magnetic machines, and I had magnets and chi machines and infratronic devices, and you name it. But long story short, I didn't get better. I got worse. And it was so frustrating because every one of these people I saw was getting great results with others, but not with me. And so, I'd go for them. And, like when I say acupuncture, I want everyone to know, when I say I tried acupuncture, I don't mean I had 5 sessions. What I mean is I went and found the best Chinese doctor in town and saw him twice a week for 2 years. So I was doing all these things and I didn't get better. I got worse. And things really hit rock bottom in 2003 when I agreed to have an experimental surgery because I found a doctor who thought that he had this experimental surgery he thought could help me. And so, again, long story short, when I went to have the surgery and I woke up afterwards, my right arm was paralyzed. And so as bad as things were before that, now I couldn't use my arm at all. And so, I couldn't drive. I needed help, getting dressed in the morning, using the restroom. It was just a nightmare. And my arm was paralyzed for over 4 months. I had had a second operation, which didn't really help. And it was then that one of my aunts turned me on to her friend Terry. And Terry was quite a character. She'd been a friend of the family. She was my aunt's best friend for like 20 years. And she had been a really successful financial professional. She was super smart, Wharton School MBA, made, tons of money working big jobs in finance. And, again, long story short, she got sick and almost died. And the thing that literally saved her life was learning to work with what are called theta brainwaves. And by using the theta brain state to uncover subconscious blocks, it literally saved her life. And she was so excited by this, she quit her job in finance And this was something because she was making like 175 grand a year, right? This was like, she was making big money.
That's big
And
money, yeah.
yep, for most of us at least, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, for sure.
she just quit her job to become a full-time healer. And honestly, when I first heard this, I thought she'd gone nuts. I'm like, why would you do that, right? You had this amazing job making all this money. I figured, wow, this lady's really gone off the deep end of the new age pool, right?
Right.
But I was desperate, and so I agreed to have a session with her. And so I remember going to see Terry, and I remember I walked into her apartment and sat on the couch, and she worked with me for about an hour, and she talked to me about the importance of the subconscious mind. She showed me how to check myself for subconscious blocks, asked me a lot of questions about God and my parents and what had happened with my best friend and everything I'd been through. It was all kind of interesting, but I admit that at the time I was like, okay, lady, it's all well and good to talk about your feelings, but that's not really why I'm here, right? I'm here because I'm in a lot of pain and the doctors gave up on me and now I can't move my arm. That's why I'm here. And so at the end of our session, she just said, okay, Brent, just relax, dear. We'll take care of your arm. And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever, right? Because I had been to different kinds of healers before. I had done some hands-on work, Reiki healing, pranic healing, never seemed to do anything for me. And she's sitting across the room from me because this is all done with the mind. There's no hands-on, there's no devices, nothing you take, nothing like that. And she's literally sitting across the room from me, and she kind of goes into this meditation. And about a minute later, I felt this pop inside my elbow. And I was like, whoa. And I remember Terry kind of opened her eyes and smiled and said, okay, Brent, try your arm now. And I went and I was like, oh my God, I could move my arm again. And I didn't know what had happened, but I did know I had just experienced a miracle. And so that was understandably a huge turning point in my life. And that was the moment where this MIT-trained software engineer took a totally different course in life and decided to become a professional healer, just like Terry, because I really wanted to learn this and I wanted to figure it out and share it with people because, this had literally saved my life. At the same time, before we talk a little bit more about how it works, I want everyone listening to know that when I started this, I was terrible at it. Because you might think, oh, Brent, you sound like you're so smart and you went to MIT and all these things. I'm sure that was easy for you. No, not at all. The truth was that I was so stuck in my head that it was very, very difficult for me to learn this. And I had zero natural talent as a healer, as an intuitive, nothing like that. Everything I did was learned. And I want to emphasize that because I want everyone listening to know that you can do this too. There is no natural talent required. Everybody has the power of a master healer inside of them. Everybody has incredible intuition. All you need is someone to help you unlock it. And so the next phase of my journey was about 10 years where I pretty much mostly just did research. And I started a professional practice, started doing healing sessions, learned everything I could from Terry. And then I started on this journey of trying to seek out the best healers, the intuitives, the gurus, the masters. And I wanted to learn everything I could from them because, again, I didn't have a natural talent or ability for this, not at all. What I did have was a strong background in engineering and science. And so I applied that to little by little, I reverse engineered and figured out what they were doing. And really what it comes down to is whether it's energy healing, intuition, spiritual ascension, even enlightenment, it's just a matter of technology. And with the right technology, anybody can do it. And it may seem like an incredible thing, but I want everyone to know that even if you don't see it, all of our lives are filled with miracles. Every moment of life is a miracle. But most of us have been conditioned to take it for granted. As an example, if you were to take that cell phone in your pocket and get in a time machine and take it back 100 years, everybody would think it's a miracle, huh?
True that.
Right. Even without a network, you can record video, audio, you can show pictures, you can do advanced mathematical calculations. There's incredible things you can do with this device, right?
That's right.
Well, 100 years ago, it would have been considered a miracle or some kind of magic. But today, it's commonplace. We don't think twice that, oh, of course, everyone has a device in their pocket you can use to have a real-time video conference with people in China, right? I mean, that's pretty amazing. And so I want everyone to know that these things that sound incredible, miraculous healings, life transformations, prosperity, finding purpose, finding love, that with the right technology, all of these things can be easy. That it's not just for those that have some special talent or a chosen few. These things are meant for everybody. And it's been my goal to really crack the code, to figure it out and make it easy for people. Because what I found was, at least in most of the different trainings I went in, what I found was most of them, whether it was, energy healing or intuition or whatnot, what I found was there's a lot of people out there who can do some pretty incredible things. No doubt about that. But for most of them, it's some talent or gift they were born with. Most of them don't really know exactly what they're doing or how it works. And that's where I come in. I did not have that natural talent. I did not have that ability. But I was able to figure it out. And honestly, it's just technology. And with the right technology, anybody can learn to do these things. And that's why I'm so excited about this.
Well, I would be too. And I want to bring up something that you triggered something there when you were talking about that. Last year, I found a television show that was on for about eight shows, and it was called The Healer. And that's what struck me was I was doing a channel surfing, and I seen this show that I had never seen before, and it was called The Healer. So I tuned in, and it's this young man from Australia. And I've talked a little bit about him on the show, and not to him, but about him, about the show. And he was working out of Hollywood. You could tell because he would always have a segment in there working with some of the stars, working with some of, their issues, but he was also working with just regular folk. Now, interestingly enough, there would be most of the time he wouldn't touch these people. And sometimes he would, but most of the time he wouldn't touch these people. And they would have these spontaneous healings, and then they went back and they filmed these people months and months later and showing that the results were still permanent. Now, what I'm getting at here is what he says. He says, I don't know how it works. I just know that it does.
And that's pretty much what I found from all the different masters that I went to.
Yep.
It was either something they were born with, or they had some kind of spiritual experience and all of a sudden they could do it. It was not like that for me. I learned this. Right. I went to lots of different teachers. I looked at what they were doing, and I did exactly what they taught me at MIT. I took it apart, figured out how it worked, and put it back together and made it better. And go ahead.
I want to share this with you and share it with the audience. Back in the 90s, I was on this quest, and that's what I'm going to call it, as a quest. And I was one of those people that you talked about that was born with some natural showing abilities. We all have the abilities, and I've said that 1,000 times. It's part of the human nature. It's part of who we are is to have intuition, is to be able to do these things. We just have to figure out how to do it. So I went through this myriad of doing just exactly what you did, which was to go through, and I went to, all these different doctors. I also went and took I have 10 different types of modality healing techniques that I use, have used in the past, and still try to work it in a little bit with what I do now. And one of the things that I realized after going through and spending thousands upon tens of thousands of dollars for training education and workshops and seminars, not including the travel and all that stuff that you had to do back in those days. Cause that was way before video conferencing and stuff went on.
Sure.
You know, you had to go to these things, and it always left me a little flat. You know what I mean? It's like, there's something more to this. I'm missing it. And when I picked up your book and started reading, I was like, okay, he speaks a language I understand because I talk about programming. I'm not a computer person at all, but I can tell you is that I started with computers when they were, you know, I remember you talking about bulletin boards. It was like people wouldn't even understand that. Everything was in DOS.
I miss DOS. I love DOS.
Oh man, I tell you, it was crazy. Dial up. You had to listen to it. It was just the coolest thing ever though. You were talking to people from all over the world. It was just, you know, it was crazy. It's crazy stuff. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there now that are too young to even know how fast this particular, industry has grown and what it's actually done for us. And so when you talk about reverse engineering, I was like, I wish I'd have thought about that. Because, you know, I think that you're onto something really big here. Matter of fact, I know you're onto something really big here. But anyway, I'm going to let you continue. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to share that with you and the audience as well. So, anyway, go ahead.
And so to give a parallel, if you, again, gutting your time machine, go back 500 years and say, how long does it take to get from the East Coast to Europe? They'd say, well, it takes at least 3 weeks on a ship. Today, you know, you can do it in about 4 hours on an airplane.
Right.
So that's a big difference, right? That's what I've done for the world of metaphysics. I've just elevated the technology. When I first learned this, you know, it took me a couple weekend trainings and several months of practice before I experienced my first healing of someone. So it was a pretty big investment of time and energy. You know, it took me, you know, probably about 3 months. With the technology I've developed, it takes a few hours to teach people healing. That's it. And people are able to start using the processes and seeing results within just a few hours. On my road to become a master healer, it took me about 7 years of full-time work. And, you know, like you mentioned, somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 spent along the way.
Yeah.
On, you know, seminars and intensives and retreats and one-on-ones and so on and so forth. So 7 years full-time for me to get there. With the technology I have, it takes most people anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months to achieve that skill of a master healer. So it's just a matter of breaking it down. And I'm glad you mentioned the programming. As, of course, you and most of your audience know, there are no coincidences, are there?
No, never.
Right?
That word isn't even in my vocabulary anymore.
A coincidence is simply something that we don't see the connections.
Right.
Right? Doesn't mean they're not there. It just means we don't see them. So it is not a coincidence that my background is in software engineering. Because in many ways, that was the perfect sort of preparation for what I do now. Because the truth is that we all work just like computers. And so the trouble with the way we're approaching our lives is we're doing it almost completely backwards. And so let me give an example. There was, I remember back in the 90s, there was a blonde joke that circulated. And it went something like this. How do you know when a blonde is being using your computer? Well, it'll be covered in black marker and whiteout. And that's pretty funny, right?
Yeah.
It's not so funny when we realize that that's exactly how most of us have been living our lives.
That's right.
And so to give an example, we all know that if you want your program to work better, drawing on the monitor isn't going to help, is it?
Not so much.
Of course. But if you stop to think about it, that's exactly what most traditional doctors do. They're giving you a bunch of medical procedures and prescription drugs in order to push numbers around on a test. So instead of getting to the core of the problem, they're simply manipulating symptoms. And that's really how most of us are trying to live our lives. And it goes the same with money. It goes the same with love. It goes the same with purpose, even enlightenment. And so the way we really work is we're all full of programs. And all of us have a program for every aspect of our lives. You have a program for how much money you make. You have a program for your sense of purpose. You have a program for your social life. You have a program for romance. You have a program for your physical health. You have a program for your emotional health. We have a program for everything. And trying to get more money in life by manipulating money works as well as trying to fix your software by drawing on the monitor. It just doesn't work that way, right?
Right.
The good news is, with the right technology, you can access that code. You can learn how to get into the subconscious and find exactly where these programs are and then change them.
You rewrite the code.
Yes, you're literally rewriting the code. I call it the software of the soul. And there's a lot of different terms for it. Some people will call them beliefs because that's what they are. Some will call it your code. Some will call it your karma. These are all just different terms for the same thing.
Right. Agreed.
And if we can learn to access our own code and make changes at that level, then you can really see things happen. That's how we get permanent, lasting change. And really, it doesn't really matter what the problem is. And so I know we're going to do some questions a little bit later. Before we even get to them, I want to answer about 90% of the questions right now, if that's okay.
Okay. That's perfect.
And so, I've done, I'm not sure if it's hundreds or thousands, lots of interviews. I love doing media like this. I love getting the word out. And probably 90% of the questions I get are of the following. People will say, hey, Brent, this sounds really cool, but my particular problem is X, Y, and Z. Can you help with that? So I want to answer those questions right now. And the answer is this technology of consciousness. This can help with any problem created by your mind, which is all of them. So the answer is yes. However, there's a second part to the answer, which is another thing, because I want to be honest with everybody. That's just my nature, right? I'm an engineer. I'm a scientist. In terms of engineering and science, the only thing that works is honesty. And so another thing everyone needs to know is that we don't get to pick the miracles. They pick us. So nobody can guarantee you an instant healing or a miraculous recovery on a particular issue or problem. Anybody that makes that claim, they're just trying to take your money. Don't trust them. What I can share with everybody is an incredible technology that has facilitated literally thousands of miracles. I mean, thousands. The count for my personal private session clients is getting close to 1,600. So that's not bad. Anyone that goes to my website at awakeningdynamics.com, if you check the testimonials page, there's something like 175 testimonials there. It would literally take you days to go through all the testimonials because there's so many. And that's not a coincidence, right? If you have one incredible story of a healing, okay, maybe it's a coincidence. When you have thousands, you know that there's something real there, huh?
Something's going on, for sure.
Right. The other thing I want everyone to know is that, yes, instant healings do happen. I've seen so many miracles happen. Things even the most serious diseases. I've seen lots of instant healings from cancer, including the story of my mother, which we may come back to if anyone's curious.
Sure.
I've seen instant healings. I even had a client once who had a broken bone that knitted overnight. HIV, asthma, allergies, depression, anxiety, back pain, knee pain, you name it. Just about anything you can name, I've seen miracles happen. However, I want to emphasize that this consciousness technology, learning to use the theta state, harnessing the power of the subconscious, this is sometimes you get what I call the magic wand or the miracle, and sometimes what you get is a process. And so, as an example, when I went to see Terry back in 2003, I had a lot of problems. Honestly, my life was a train wreck. I was suffering from severe depression, social anxiety, back pain, neck pain, pain in my arms, almost every joint in my body except for my ankles hurt. My joke used to be, my left ankle feels okay, everything else hurts. Right?
Yeah.
I was in debt. I was on disability. I was, as they call, a dateless wonder. Couldn't get a date to save my life. And so in that first session, my frozen elbow instantly healed. Never gave me trouble again. However, all the chronic pain that I had that led me to have that surgery that caused my paralyzed arm, that did not heal instantly. In fact, it never changed in any one particular session of healing I ever did. However, and this is the important part, if I look at the year or two before I started working this consciousness piece and the year or two after, I was seeing the same acupuncturist, the same physical therapist, the same Reiki person, the same everybody, right? It was the same team of people. For the years before this, I got worse. I got worse and worse and worse. After I started working with this stuff, clearing the subconscious, accessing the theta state, I was seeing the same people doing the same things, and I started to see results. And it came slowly. But over time, I was able to overcome all of those problems. And a lot more that, I don't want to bore everyone with all the horrors I've been through. Not that interesting. And so by using the technology, this is a complement to other things in life. It's a complement to getting exercise and eating well and positive thinking and all these things. You put those together in combination, it's almost unstoppable. Almost unstoppable. As an example, weight loss. Can these processes facilitate weight loss? Absolutely. But nobody goes to sleep one night and wakes up 30 pounds lighter the next day. Right? It doesn't work that way. What we can do is eliminate the subconscious obstacles. Take away the reasons why we are overeating or not exercising or using too much sugar or whatever it is. Heal the digestive tract, heal the thyroid, heal the adrenals. And when we do that, then you will find yourself naturally doing the things that lead to weight loss. And that's so beautiful because that's sustainable. That the gift we get is so much greater than what we think. I still remember that when I went in to see Terry that day, I wasn't expecting to get a new career. I wasn't expecting to get the keys to enlightenment. I just wanted to have less pain so I could go back to work.
Right.
But
that
what
was
I got
your ultimate goal.
Right. What I got was so much more valuable. And a lot of it came through a process. And I mention that because I know a lot of people tend to, especially if you've had a problem for a long time, chronic disease, chronic pain, whatever it is, could be chronic money issues. A lot of people have the mindset of they're looking for the silver bullet. They want to find that one perfect technique or process or recipe that's just going to take away their problem forever. Well, sometimes it works that way, but sometimes you have to go through a process. And so I'd encourage everybody, even if you don't get a miracle the first go around, stick with it. The rewards are vast. Because it can take time. It can take work. But, if people ask, well, does it work for this? Does it work for that? The answer is this works for everything. The question is, are you willing to stick around long enough to give it a chance? That's the real question.
Yeah. And I have to say that that's one of the things that I kind of owned myself was that everything that we do, well, not everything, but a lot of things that we do is a process. You can't always just get to, I call it the point of origin,
Sure.
the first go around, because we've got other things that kind of insulate that spot, so to speak, if you will, that code, and we have to get through that in order to get down into where it starts at. Because we've also built stuff up around it.
Of course. A true story. One of my early clients came to see me because she had asthma and had, been to lots of doctors and therapies and nothing was working for her. And so we did a couple sessions And I didn't hear from her. And then she called me about a month later. And she said, Brent, I wanted you to know, it's important you know that your healing didn't work on my asthma. But I reconciled with my daughter, who I hadn't talked to in 20 years. She's now part of my life. And a week after our second session, I was accepted into an experimental drug trial. And the new drug is working beautifully, and my asthma is now under control. But I want to let you know that the healing didn't work.
Okay, so that's a perspective. Yes. That's interesting. That's really interesting. So what we did was we went through and you peeled some of those layers off, and
that's right.
And so, in some way, obviously she's helped. I mean, she's healed a relationship.
Absolutely.
And, found something that worked to keep her asthma under control so that she can function in life. So, hey.
And the story gets even better. I forget if I think it was someone she met during the course of this experimental trial. They started dating and she got married. So had she gotten an instant healing, that never would have happened.
Right. She wouldn't have been there. I believe that there's a divine order in everything.
There's absolutely. So I just want everyone to know, don't panic. If you use these tools, you will absolutely see miracles. That's guaranteed. We don't necessarily control which ones they are, but you will see them. And for everything else, know that you're getting a process. And that process could ultimately be a lot more valuable to you.
I would agree. I would agree with that. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes before we go to the break at the top of the hour, Brent. So I don't want us to get too far into anything that we would have to get interrupted for. So when we come back after the break, maybe you can get into some of the techniques and talk a little bit more specifically about it. But in the meantime, I want to say that I absolutely love the stories that you've been telling, especially that last one.
True story. Really happened.
And I agree with that because I can tell you stuff like that's happened to me with other people as well when I've done work on them, and they'll say, well, that didn't work, but, what else has been going on in your life? And then they start telling you some of the, other, and I call them miracles. Right. I believe that there's miracles that happen every day. It's just a matter of how do we perceive those. But, as a society as a whole, there's so much negativity out there that even if a miracle come up and slapped you in the face, a lot of times people don't even recognize it for what it is because that program is running.
Yep. It's all just a matter of code.
Yeah, and I absolutely am really, truly enjoying this. One of the questions that I had for you, and, if you want to hold off and answer this on the second hour, that would be fine, is you are teaching this to people. Are you teaching people to do this, to teach others, or just for themselves? How does that work for you?
Yes, and yes.
Yes, all the above. Okay.
There are some of my clients that aren't necessarily interested in learning to be healers, but go through the trainings because they're so transformative. One of the fun things that I do is just about once a month I do a webinar called the Healathon.
Okay.
And I talk a little more in depth about how it works, and I do some interactive processes. And I show one of my favorite things is I have slides of live blood cell analysis done. And I've had this done a couple times before and after a weekend with me. And so we take a drop of their blood on Friday before class starts, and then again on Sunday at the end. And you will be blown away at the difference it makes. That just by going through this process and being in the high frequency energy, it makes a radical shift in the physical health of the body. And so and this actually shows up, you can actually see it in your blood cells. It's amazing. So I encourage everyone to check that out.
So how does somebody get that information on your Healathon, on your webinar?
It's really easy. Anyone that is interested to learn more about this stuff, you can just hop over onto my website at awakeningdynamics.com. And, there's some fun stuff there. There's a spiritual IQ quiz and some other neat stuff. You should see a little box pop up. Just put in your first name and email, and you're going to get a couple goodies from me. First of all, You're going to get completely for free the first volume of my book, The Formula for Miracles. So you'll be able to get started on that right away. I'm also, everybody that comes to my website, I also do a block clearing call once a month and Q&A session called the Wealth Club. So you'll get an invitation to join us for free on a live call. And I think that's important because as much as I like to talk about this, I want everyone to experience it too. It's where I'll show you how to communicate with your subconscious and check for blocks, and you'll have an opportunity to submit blocks, and I'll clear them for you. So all that comes for free, and you'll also get the invitation for the next Healathon, which is, as we're doing this live, it's going to be next Wednesday night.
This coming Wednesday or a week from Wednesday?
Next week. Which would be, May 3rd, I think.
Yeah.
Or
okay,
2nd,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, May 3rd. All right.
Next Wednesday, yep.
Okay. I'm going to make sure that I'm part of that. For sure. That sounds awesome. I'm making notes as you're talking, so.
I guess the longer answer to your question, most people come to me not necessarily because they want to be a professional healer. They just want to improve their lives. They want to have better health. They want to be more powerful. They want to have sharper intuition, discover their purpose. This is really the shortcuts to enlightenment. Some want to be healers just to help their friends and family. And, a smaller number, I'd say about 10%, want to actually go on and become professionals and teach this work to other people. And so, I have different programs to meet everybody where they're at. Because, this stuff is so powerful and so amazing and so easy and so fun. I don't know why anybody would not want to have this in their life.
Well, I would agree with that. And that's one of the things that I found as a teacher myself and some of the other, energy healing and other, techniques that I've learned through the years is that a lot of times people just wanted it just for themselves or for their loved ones, that
Sure.
they were just happy doing whatever their life's work was or what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And certainly that works. It works because if we were all teachers, then you don't have any students, right?
Yeah. And for anybody that already does something like this, if you do massage or Reiki or you're a chiropractor or anything like that, what I can show you is how to do that same work and make it much more powerful.
Perfect.
You can clear the space, set intentions, align with people, synchronize to their energy. There's a whole, list of very easy things I can show you. I mean, I even had a bartender once that he went from the verge of being fired to be given a promotion and a raise because I showed him how to clear the energy of the space he was in. And
see, that is so cool.
Yep, he became the most popular bartender, and all of a sudden his bar became the hot spot in town.
Isn't that fabulous?
Yep.
Well, we're at the top of the hour, and I'd love for you to come back and talk about some of those other stories about that. It's not just about healing, but it's about other things as well. I mean, it's all about peeling the onion back, right? Peeling the onion back, not engine. Onion. I do have rented lips tonight, so they don't belong to me, so we'll find somebody else's and put them on, right? In any case, I tell people, go ahead and go to his website. They're posted in the chat rooms, the awakeningdynamics.com. And also the other website is theformulaformiracles.com. So you all stay with us, and we're going to be back at the top of the hour, and we're going to be talking more about the Formula for Miracles Part 1 in the book and get a lot more information. Stay with us. All right, everyone. Welcome back. You're listening to Journeys with Rebecca right here on wolfspiritradio.com and also Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, Studio B. Have a fantastic guest tonight, Brent Michael Phillips. We're talking about the Formula for Miracles. And so far we have had just an absolutely fantastic conversation. We ended up at the bottom half of the first hour talking about a bartender and what happened with him, and I want to welcome my guest back. Welcome back, Brent.
Well, excited to be here. This is a lot of fun.
Good. Well, I wanted to make it fun for you and also easy and also give you enough time to certainly explain what's going on. So let's talk to Let's talk about the bartender, because he kind of wetted everyone's whistle about he became, the best bartender ever after he was almost getting fired or something. And so let's talk a little bit more about him.
Yeah. And so, what happened was he had come to one of my online classes. He's actually lives in Germany, and he was really struggling. And at first he was a little confused. He's like, what am I going to do with this, right? I don't really want to be a healer. And I told him, hey, you know what? It's simple. Just use the things you learned at your bar. So I showed him how to clear the space. I showed him how to fill the bar and everyone in it with the energy of unconditional love. I showed him how to manifest the intention of having a busy night where people love his service and give him big tips. We did some subconscious clearing work to make sure he was open to receive, to make sure he felt he was worth it. And, it didn't happen instantly. It took about 2 weeks. But all of a sudden, for reasons that no one could explain, all of a sudden everyone started coming to his bar. He became the most popular bartender there, and they gave him a raise and a promotion.
And there you go. And he's having fun.
Yeah. So the point being is, it doesn't really matter what you do. Maybe you want to be a healer. Great. I would love to support you in that. If you do want to be a healer, I know you want to get the best technology available. You don't want to spend 7 years like I did learning to be a master healer when it can be done in a matter of a few months. But even if you have no interest in that, this can make whatever you do, it can make you so much better. Even parenting. I believe that the greatest gift any child can get from their parents is their parents' own spiritual evolution.
Oh, so true.
I mean, so powerful. And we haven't even really gotten into the subject of awakening yet, which might be something to talk a little bit about in the second hour.
Okay.
Which really is, I like to think of what I teach is really in two major pieces to it. The first piece, which we focused on so far, is what I call the metaphysics. And so metaphysics would be things like how to do instant healings, how to do intuitive readings, how to check for a subconscious block, how to clear a block, how to clear space, how to communicate with your guardian angels or ancestors, how to manifest from a theta wave. These are all very important and powerful metaphysical techniques. However, of course, I'm not the only one teaching that, right? There's a lot of people that are out there teaching healing and manifesting and block clearing and all that. What I can offer is what I think is the most advanced, the most powerful and easiest technology for it. And, unless we have some people ask specific questions, I won't geek out too much with the details of how the system works. But I have some shortcuts and advances that no one else has figured out, even a patent pending technology on how to do this stuff to make healings fast, easy, powerful. But the more advanced portion of what I teach is called awakening. And for me, the awakening was a huge turning point in my life that in some ways was even more important and more powerful than when my elbow instantly healed. Because here's what happened to me. I had learned these great metaphysics. I had built a business as a healer. I was making money, bought a home, all these amazing things that happened. But I was still suffering. I was still stressed out. And it doesn't really matter how much money you're making or not making. If you're alone in a relationship, suffering happens on the inside. There's a great saying from the Buddha. The Buddha told us that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Mm. And so even after I had become a master healer and created hundreds of miracles, even after I helped to save my mother's life, very long story short, in 2010, she was diagnosed with clear cell endometrial cancer. And that's considered a death sentence. The long-term survival rate is like 2%. And I did one session of clearing with her over the phone in a healing. And she went in to have surgery. And afterwards, her oncologist was astonished. He said, Karen, I don't know what happened, but somehow it all vanished from your body. It was all gone. So literally saved her life. Right. And so I had seen and done some amazing things, but I was still suffering. And it wasn't until it took me about 10 years before I finally got it. What we call that moment of awakening. And when I realized that, what I realized was that most of us don't know what we are. And so awakening is a very simple thing in concept. Awakening is understanding what you are. What is this you that has thoughts and feelings and experiences, that makes a decision, that takes actions, that has memories and a personality? And I realized that I had spent my whole life thinking I knew what I was, but I was totally wrong. And this is often called in the East the study of Advaita Vedanta, or what's known as Jnana Yoga, the yoga of wisdom, sometimes called non-duality. And so this is really the spiritual piece. This is the big picture of understanding what exactly are you? What exactly is God? What is life all about? Why are we here? What is our purpose? That's the spiritual work. And so I want to offer everybody both of these things. And to my knowledge, I'm the only one that I have found that has really integrated these two, has taken the metaphysics and the technology and advanced it, but closely integrated it with the spiritual teachings. And what I offer is what has been called the only true third-generation consciousness technology available. And so what does that mean? I'll define that for everybody. What has been called first-generation consciousness technology is kind of the standard positive thinking law of attraction stuff. It's not wrong. It's correct and powerful. It's just primitive. Just like
incomplete.
Right, it's incomplete. Just like a car from 100 years ago, you take a Model T and you compare it to a modern Tesla, they have a lot in common, don't they? But the Tesla is far more advanced technologically. It can do a lot more. It's a lot more comfortable, right? It's much faster, much easier to drive.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not that the first generation is wrong, but that's like positive thinking, coaching, law of attraction, visualizations. It's a great start, but it's very limited. The second generation is when we get into things more like EFT, processes that can access the subconscious, that can release trapped emotions. So things like emotion code, the healing codes, systems like that. They're very good at identifying and clearing some of the subconscious pieces, which is that's a huge advancement over the first generation. And with the second generation technology, that's when you start to see a lot of medical miracles. That's when you start to see people having instant healings and incredible recoveries on spontaneous remissions. The trouble is, when done from ego, all healing and spiritual work is inherently limited because it's done from ego. And the challenge we have in our modern world is there's you may have heard the old Zen joke that goes like this: there's an old fish and two young fish swimming around in the ocean, and the old fish says to the young fish, "Hey boys, how's the water today?" And the young fish look at each other like he's crazy, and they're like, "What the heck is water?" So the point being that fish don't know they live in water because they've been completely immersed in it their entire existence. They have no idea that there is something that's not water. And that's the trouble with being humans in the modern world. But here, the ocean is ego. We live so completely immersed in ego, we have no idea that there's other ways of living that are not completely egocentric. And it's nobody's fault. It's just the way it is, right?
Right.
And so whether you're doing energy healing, law of attraction, intuition, all of those have an inherent limiter on their ability and power when used from ego. When you think you are a separate being. And so I'm going to go out a little bit on a limb here and let everyone know that one of the incomplete teachings that's out there is we're taught that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. That's actually incorrect.
I don't know if Brent can hear me, but I can't hear him at all.
Oops. Well, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
JP?
Yeah, I'll keep talking for a second here just so you can work out the technology. I can hear you okay?
I'm just going to bring Rebecca back in.
Okay.
And reset her call.
No worries.
Yeah, she's on a bit of a delay there. This is very interesting. Thank you very much.
Well, it's for everyone listening, this is not unusual. When we get into the more advanced material, it's not uncommon that it will interfere with electronics, and I've blown up a lot of light bulbs and things in my time.
Okay, we're back online. Rebecca, you there?
I'm back, and I missed all of that.
So what I was saying was, it's interesting. This happens to me a lot. That when we get into the more advanced topics and the energy goes up, it interferes with electronics.
Yes.
And that's something I can teach you too. I can show you how to harmonize the electronics to your energy so it doesn't happen as much. That's one of the neat metaphysical tricks. Yeah, it's a fun one.
Okay. Yeah,
but anyhow, what I was saying before you got disconnected was just that one of the common teachings in this world is actually incomplete. And it's something you may have heard before that teaches us that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
That's actually not true. Because the truth is we're not beings at all. And that's the beginning of awakening. And let me offer some explanation, because that's a pretty big claim I just made, right?
Absolutely. A lot of people are going, what?
Right. Absolutely. And so a lot of us think that we're some kind of spiritual being or a soul or something like that, right? There is a body and there is a mind and there is a soul. Absolutely. Right? We know we have bodies. There they are, right?
Yeah.
We know we have minds. That's where this conversation is occurring, right? In your mind. And there's also a soul. We could talk a lot about the nature of the soul and soul families and soul contracts. It's fascinating. But none of that is actually us. And I can offer very simple proof that we've all heard in different ways, shapes, and forms hundreds of times that we're all one, that we're all connected, things like that, right?
Yes.
That is, in fact, what all of our greatest spiritual teachers back for thousands of years have told us. We're all the same. We're all one. There is no separation. Well, if the truth of our nature was a soul or a spirit being, well, then I got a soul and you got a soul and that guy over there has a soul. And those things are somehow distinct and separate, aren't they?
Yeah.
So
Separation
therefore,
itself.
right, we must come to the conclusion that cannot be the truth of us. Is not that we are spiritual beings or souls. That's not correct either. Again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that there's not a soul. There is. Just like there's a body and there's a mind. But the truth of what we are as awareness is beyond even those things. And awakening is simply knowing what you are. It's that simple. And this is why it's been called the beginning of the end of suffering. It's been called the foot in the door to enlightenment. It is the gateway to higher consciousness. Those familiar with the Hawkins scale know that that Hawkins would teach that 499 was the pinnacle of what may be called the victor state, of genius, of wealth, of popularity, of health, of power. But notice that on a scale of 1 to 1,000, 499 is not even halfway, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so awakening is the key to the 500 vibration. It is this magical key that unlocks the highest parts of the spiritual journey. And I also find it fascinating that, I'm a big fan of Hawkins' work. I've read all of his books. He was an amazing teacher. He didn't know how to get people to make that transition. I do. So that's what awakening is. And that's why the system is called Awakening Dynamics. The dynamics is the metaphysics. Instant healing, theta wave, manifesting, block clearing, all that good stuff. The awakening is the spiritual piece. And I want to offer both because we need both. We need the metaphysical tools to help us in our lives, to heal our bodies, to find our prosperity, to find our purpose. These are important things. But we also need the spirituality because all of those other things done entirely from ego can only create more suffering. And The more advanced work that we talk about, I demonstrate a little bit in the webinar. We get into turning on your ability to see energy and auras with your open eyes, learning how to read the energy that people emit, to literally see the codes and stories that are running them, and how to swap those out. You can learn how to dissolve pain with your mind. It's actually very easy. And so in the advanced work, it's really a workshop in moving towards enlightenment. Because with awakening is sort of in my experience at least, it's the only thing that cuts to the core of attachment. That as long as you think you're a separate being, it will be impossible to get past attachment. Right? How can you not be attached to your own bank account, or the amount of pain in your body, or what's happening with your children? As long as we're identified with the ego, the separate being, there will always be suffering, and it's an inherent limiter on how wonderful life can be. The good news is that by learning to transcend the ego is not the enemy, it's not the bad guy, not at all. It's a wonderful thing. There's a saying in the world of Advaita that the ego is a terrible master but a wonderful servant. And so that's where I'd like to take everybody. And so the foundational work that everybody can get and learn very quickly is the metaphysics. How to do healings, how to check for blocks, how to do manifestations, how to get to the theta wave, how to clear space. These are things everybody can learn in a day or two in my trainings. Piece of cake, simple. The awakening, the embodiment, that's the journey to enlightenment. I'll admit that takes a little longer, but it's also vastly more valuable. And so, I want to meet everybody where they're at. If your primary thing is you want to clear some money blocks, great. I have great technology for that. Heal the body, absolutely. But if you're really serious about the spiritual journey, there's no one out there that I'm aware of other than me and my colleague Carl, who we co-teach our advanced courses together. It's really the third generation technology, which is all the wonderful metaphysics, but it's tightly integrated to spirituality, to understanding what we are and how it really works. You put those things together, it's quite magical. We had a gentleman at one of my advanced trainings last year. He had MS, and he had not been out of his wheelchair in 7 years. And we watched him on video conferencing using Zoom. After we did the energy attunement with him, we watched him stand up for the first time in 7 years. That was pretty awesome.
That just, wow, made my little heart just woo.
Yep. And so, this is available to everybody. And, I'll let everyone know right now, the hard part is not what you think it is. To learn to become powerful, to master the art of healing. The way I teach it with this technology, that's actually pretty easy. The hard part is learning how to sit in the face of those you care about and love and know you have the power to help, but can't.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
Yeah. I have to agree with that.
Yep. Now, there's answers for that too. But it's kind of funny. We think, it's so difficult to become powerful. It's actually not. When you know what you're doing, becoming powerful is easy. Learning how to accept and surrender to the flow of life, the things we can't control, that'll be your biggest challenge over the long run.
It is. That elusive control. I learned that many, many years ago. The more you think you're in control, the less you actually have it.
Right. The good news is that once you've gone through the awakening process, control actually becomes kind of like a joke, because you'll see very clearly that you never actually had control in the first place. So you aren't actually losing anything in the process. So there's not much to worry about.
Exactly. Yep. It's actually quite freeing.
It is. It is quite freeing.
Yeah, it's quite freeing. Well, let's ask a question before you go on. We have a question that came up that wanted, and you probably talked a little bit about it, but we're going to ask, and it's from Debrielle. Can you talk a bit about the theta state and how to access it? And she's saying she's loving your information.
Sure. I'd be happy to. So the theta state is one of the really fundamentals of the metaphysics. that the theta state is like this wonderful magical key that unlocks the power of the subconscious. The trouble is that the only time most of us naturally go to a theta state is when we're asleep and dreaming, during what's called REM, or rapid eye movement sleep. That's when we go to the theta state. And so part of the technology is to learn how to access that same brain state, but when you're awake and conscious. And there's a lot of ways to do it. I have a technology I've developed, I call the Formula for Miracles technology, that is done with audio programs using binaural beats. So all you need to do is listen to them with headphones, and the audio will automatically entrain your brain into a theta state. So it's a wonderful technology. The trouble is, it takes about 5 minutes to do so. Okay. And so I have a variety of audio programs that utilize this technology. A couple on wealth, one on relationships, one on awakening. These are powerful tools that, well, with the audio programs, it's usually most of them about 4 or 5 hours of lectures and presentations, and about 4 or 5 hours of encoded block clearings. So just by using this technology, it will put you into a theta state, and each of the programs clears between 300 and 400 subconscious blocks just by listening. Wow. So that's a lot of fun.
Wow.
So that's a great choice for anybody that hasn't had the right training yet. However, over the long run, I'd encourage everyone to come to one of my weekend intensives, where in the first couple hours, I use the process of energy macros to show you how to get to a theta state within a few seconds, so you can learn to control it. And so the way I would describe it is these energy macros. You don't need to know any of this to be a great healer, by the way. So this is just a little aside for the geeks who like to learn this stuff. The trouble with a lot of the processes I learned for healing and intuition was they were often long and complicated. And so I would say it was kind of like the computer software industry was 40, 50 years ago, where if you needed software, you had to go write it yourself or hire someone to make it for you. And writing software is complicated and expensive and time-consuming. It takes a while. And so what I've done with the energy macros, one of the reasons I can train people so quickly is I've learned how to take all these things I've learned about healing and intuitive development, and I can download it straight to the subconscious. And then all I need to do is show you how to trigger that program. And so it's kind of like if you want to play solitaire, you have a couple choices. One, you could go learn programming and then write software to run solitaire, right?
Right.
That would probably take years to do.
If you have an interest in it, yeah.
Right. If you have an interest, you could probably do it in a couple years. Or you could just, in 30 seconds, go to the App Store and download it. So that's what I've done with instant healing, with subconscious clearing, with manifesting, is I've literally put them into a subconscious library, and all I have to do is download it right into your mind and then show you how to launch it. And so I have these energy macros that will take you into that theta state, that will ground you to the earth, exit through the vortex at the back of the heart center, and put you into that elevated divine consciousness in the theta state. And it takes about 3 to 5 seconds. That's all. And then from there, you can go and play. You can do intuitive readings. You can do healings. You can do block clearings. You can clear space. You can pull cords and hooks. You can clear soul fragments. You name it. Sky's the limit.
Well, I just by having you on the show tonight, for me, like you said, there's just no coincidence. And I've been kind of stuck in a rut. I told you that earlier today. I've been kind of stuck in a rut. And having this particular conversation has opened up some channels, if you will, for recognition within myself. And I can tell you by watching the chat room and just getting the sense of what's going on that there's a lot of people out there that are going, aha, 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 And there's a lot of people that are getting it. They're really, really getting it. So my engineer, by the way, that is on the show, JP, he's absolutely probably loving all this computer stuff because he's my computer geek. He writes software programs himself and all that. And I'm sure he's having a lot of fun with listening to this information as well. So let's talk a little bit about your programs.
Sure.
You did say that for somebody that was just kind of starting out that you had a certain place where they needed to start, and then there's other places that other people could start that were maybe further down the road with their own.
Yeah, really, what I say to everybody is I will meet you wherever you're at in terms of your eagerness and dedication. So if you're gung-ho and willing to do what it takes, I can show you how to develop the skill of a master healer, anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months. That's all it takes. Some people, if you just want to get a couple blocks cleared, we can do that too. A wonderful place to start for free is, again, you just hop onto my website at awakeningdynamics.com. Awakeningdynamics.com. And a little box will pop up. Just put your first name and primary email, and everyone's going to get 3 different gifts. One, you'll get the first volume of my book, Where Science Meets Spirit, The Formula for Miracles. You'll also get an invitation to the next live Wealth Club block clearing call, where you can join us for free, learn how to check yourself for subconscious blocks, and even submit blocks to be cleared. And so that's next one, I believe, is coming up May 7th. You'll also get invitations to my Healathons I do about once a month. And at the Healathons, I have a short presentation at the beginning to talk a little bit more about how these things work. But I spend the majority of the time, I do a one-on-one session that everyone can listen in on. And then I offer healings to anybody that wants to join us that asks for one. Then we finish with a Q&A. So those are all great ways to learn a little bit more and to experience it for yourself. Because, I love to talk about it, but I like to say that actually experiencing it is a whole nother thing. I could talk to you all day about what orange juice tastes like, but it's not the same as actually pouring you a glass, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, It's lovely thought, but it just doesn't quench the thirst.
Right.
For sure. Well, this has just been really interesting to have you on and talk about this stuff. One of the things that I would maybe like for you to go in, and I see this a lot when I'm doing sessions with people, and it has to do with their environment. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's their home environment, but more likely than not, it's their work environment. Where specifically, I remember this one lady, her work environment, the building itself has an extreme amount of what I call residual energy. You can just see it. It just permeates everything. Matter of fact, I don't even know if I would be able to walk into the building. It just has that yuck, heavy feeling about it. It's just like when you walk in, I could just actually see people's whole persona change, and they become something different just walking into that place. It's not a very pleasant place at all. And so, clearing environments and clearing space, kind of, I think a little bit of might have to include a little bit of that information that you gave that bartender as well.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I would, if you could give a few tips there for people that are listening, because I know there's some people that are listening and will be listening that they have that same thing. They have an environment either within their house, maybe they live in an apartment complex, and all that energy just kind of flows around, and they don't really know how to, stop it from interfering in their lives. They just, because we're so attuned, most people are so attuned just to walking into a place, and they accept things for as they are without questioning what is really going on. How come I feel different when I'm here, and how come I feel different? They don't question enough. They don't look past their day-to-day living. They just don't stop to think about it or to look at it or, to question.
We assume if we have a headache or feeling a little nauseous or low energy, we think, oh, is it something I ate, right? Maybe I have a bug. Maybe you did. But a lot of the time, it's just the energy. Yeah. And so one of the things I teach in the first weekend intensive is how to do the space clearing, and that's what I showed the bartender. And, it takes about 10 seconds to do. It's very easy. That alone can make a huge difference in your life. Learning how to clear your space, I recommend everybody, if you can do it every day, it'll take you 30 seconds. 10 seconds to clear your home, 10 seconds to clear your office, and 10 seconds to clear your car.
Oh,
that can be a life changer all on its own.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, the car is one of the things when you get into, absolutely.
Because anytime you're on the road, the energy of all those people around you is projecting towards you and affecting you.
I love that, because I can tell you, I'll be driving down the freeway, especially the freeway, and I can just feel somebody come up behind me, and I'm like, oh my God, that person is just PO'd. Or,
yes,
oh my God,
they're just having the energy coming right off their car, can't you?
Yes, it bombards you.
Yep. And so that basic clearing technique will suffice for most situations. There are circumstances where things may be a little tougher nut to crack. In that case, what you can do is, through the ascension of your own consciousness, you can get to the place where it no longer affects you.
As an example, let's say you're married.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I find this a lot. The two people are on different paths. The one person is looking, for their spiritual growth. They're wanting, and they're wanting to change things. So they're becoming different than what they were before, when they were first married. And the other spouse is kind of a negative Nelly, and stuck in this, what we call this 3D world, and can't see anything besides.
Stop wasting money on all that crap, right?
Yes, exactly. So when you're talking about clearing, especially in relationships, because I'm telling you, I find that in so many of my clients where their husband and wives are just not on the same page. How does that work? What can I know it's about detachment. I understand that. But how would that work for somebody that's in a relationship? They love their husband or their wife or their significant other, however, you want to look at that. How does that work for them when they're already in there, in that space? They have to do this every day.
Yeah. We want to go back to what I mentioned earlier, one of the great teachings of the Buddha that told us that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And so sometimes when you get yourself clear, sometimes your partner will want to come with you on the journey. And that's great. But it doesn't always happen that way. But I guarantee that we can learn to get past all the suffering. That all the little emotional trigger points we have inside of us, we can learn to diffuse those things. And so ideally, one of very high consciousness, you could be in the face of any behavior, any circumstance, and it wouldn't affect you. And that's ultimately where we want to get to. Just like you can get to the place where you may be in a significant amount of pain, but you may not show it because there's no suffering. The great guru Ramana Maharshi, one of the best-known teachers of Advaita non-duality, there's a great story that said towards the end of his life he was dying from stomach cancer, which is supposed to be a very unpleasant and painful way to go. But he didn't seem to show any signs of it. And one of his students asked him, they said, "Master, the doctor says you're supposed to be in all this pain, but you look fine. What's happening?" And Ramana Maharshi just laughed and said, "Yes, there is pain, but to whom would I complain? Because there's nobody here." So you can even have the experience of high levels of physical pain in your body and learn to transcend that. And so can you transcend the stress and suffering caused by your spouse, your brother, your mother, whoever? Absolutely. That's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's absolutely achievable. I like to say that awakening is like learning a language or learning to play an instrument. If you've never played guitar before, you're not going to be a master 3 days later, are you?
Well,
no. No, of course not. But if you learn what you're doing and you're willing to practice and get feedback from experts and have a supportive community, you can achieve that. And so enlightenment or higher consciousness is no different. First, I'd love everyone to, come through some of the workshops and learn how it works and learn what they're doing. And then I also include in all of my programs time in my members program for the community, the ongoing support, Q&A sessions, demonstrations, things like that, because that's important.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
And that's one of my pet peeves, because I've been through lots of different training programs where you spend a couple of weekends with them, they rubber stamp your certificate, and then throw you to the street. That doesn't create mastery. What creates mastery is What creates mastery is, one, you need good, proven, but cutting-edge content. So you need to have good stuff you're learning. Two, you need supervised practice. You have to use it and apply it and get feedback, right? If you want to learn to play guitar, you better have sessions with a teacher, right? So you can get improvements and refinements and correct your mistakes. And number three is the community. You need to be in a community of like-minded people who will support you and facilitate you achieving your goals. And, I do the best I can to provide those for people. I want to give you the cutting-edge content, the best tools, the best processes. I want to give you a chance to practice it and use it and learn from the experts and put you in a community where you can find people that really believe in you and want to help you succeed. You do that. It's higher consciousness, awakening, enlightenment, miracles, much more achievable. Again, it's just technology. I looked at all the stuff that's out there. I found what works and what doesn't work. And it's nothing personal. It's like building a bridge. If you want to build a bridge, there's certain ways that you do it that work. Other ways that don't. And so as an engineer, I'm only concerned with what works. That's all that matters to me.
I'm going to ask the audience, if you have any questions, to please make sure you get them in, because we're running out of time here before the end of the show. And I don't want anyone to leave without having asked a question. And there is no such thing as a stupid question at all, or any kind of a question, as long as it pertains to, obviously, our topic matter. So if you do have a question, now would be the time for you to post those before we close out the show for tonight. And JP, I don't know how much you've been listening, but if you have a question as well, for Brent, because you're kind of a science spiritual guy as well, please don't hesitate, to jump in and turn on your mic, make it live, and ask the question if you want, or just type it in, whatever. I have to ask these next few questions here for you. Okay. Reintegrating trauma fragments. Can you speak on reintegrating trauma fragments? You did talk about fragments, and I have seen that around people too. I've looked at them, and they're extremely fragmented. Some more than others. I think all of us are to a certain extent. But
I would say that requires some skill and a delicate touch, because when that happens, it's usually a bad idea to just try to ram it all back together.
Yeah,
that doesn't work.
No.
What you want to do is find the codes, find the programs that caused the fragmentation in the first place, and work to release those first. Once you've done that, then the soul fragments are very easy to start putting back together. So it's really more a matter of the coaching and working through the subconscious to find out why they got fragmented in the first place. Release all those issues, and the rest is easy.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Are you, when we're talking about fragments, and I think a lot of times we're talking about times that were not of this, what I call timeline. And is that what you're speaking of? You're not speaking of this timeline. You're speaking of previous timelines?
It could be either or both.
Okay. I'm not sure how much you work with that, so,
I work with it absolutely. When I was first learning this stuff, I actually learned different processes for doing healings and things depending on what levels it occurred on. So did it happen in childhood? Did it happen to an ancestor? Did it happen in a past lifetime? Is it a soul contract? With the technology I've developed, we don't worry about that. It's a one-size-fits-all.
Okay. So you don't have to go back through that whole process? Nope. Okay.
Nope.
And that's what I'm looking for.
Right. You can, but it's generally not necessary.
Okay. Cool. Well, that helps a lot of people out there, especially with JP. I know why he's asking those questions, and there's a lot of people here who have dealt with and are dealing with what I call past life issues.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, one of the things that I used to do, and I still do it, is I do what I call timeline regressions, and where there's an issue. Especially when it shows up like in personality traits, where people seem to be sabotaging themselves, like say in relationships or what have you. We can go back to the point of origin. I call it the point of origin,
Sure.
where it started, and to clear that. And then they bring that forward, and it usually clears out everything.
Yeah.
But if I could take away that step from people, that would just be a fantastic thing. Or if they could do it for themselves, it'd be a fantastic thing.
Yeah. It's actually, if you peek inside the energy macros, that's exactly how they work.
Okay.
So it's sort of like an intelligent guided missile. It knows exactly where to go to.
Sure.
And
Sure.
that's why it cuts years off your learning curve.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it all through intuition and readings and regressions and crystal layouts. There's nothing wrong with that. It works. It just takes a long time.
Absolutely. It takes longer than what a lot of
Right.
people want to spend the time on, because there's
Yep.
so many separate issues, for sure. For
Correct.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, you've helped me out a great deal tonight. And I can tell you is that some of the people in the chat room here are kind of blown away by this information that you've shared. So let's talk a little bit about your courses a little bit. I know that you've spoke a little bit about them. We've kind of broken them up a little bit. So for a novice starting out, what do you recommend? What's the process for somebody starting out that is just beginning on their quest? I'm going to put it that way, or on their journey.
Sure. I would say first thing is just hop on to my website, awakeningdynamics.com. Get on the invite list, and I will give you the book as well as an invitation to the Wealth Club and to the Healathons. If you can come to one of the Healathons, that would be ideal.
Are you out in California?
I am, but I do them all broadcast online.
Okay.
And all of my trainings are also available through online broadcast.
Okay.
So I have students and clients on every continent except Antarctica. Still working on that one.
Good luck on that one. I do wish you luck on that one.
Yep. What I would say is there's a couple ways we can go. If you have a really urgent issue, I would say you can contact me, and I actually am right now. I'm taking a few new private session clients, something I don't get to do very much. So if you would like to work with me one-on-one, there's a link on the website that says private sessions. There's a short application to fill out. Shouldn't take you more than about 2-3 minutes. I review those with my assistant about twice a week. And if we feel there's a good fit, we'll follow up and schedule some time with you. So that's one option. I also encourage everyone to check out the webinars and find which aspect of this work most resonates with you. It's around what I call the 7 sacred secrets of higher dimensional living. And I talk a little bit about each of the secrets and how they work. And, the path forward would depend on what you're most interested in. For most people, going through the trainings is a no-brainer because you will learn so many things and see so much transformation. Oh my gosh. It's like 10 years off your spiritual learning curve. For those that are really serious, I have a year-long program and also a lifetime option for what's called the Awakening Intensive. And that's for those that really want to go deep into the higher consciousness. And I have a lifetime option available because it's you pay once and it's a lot less than you would pay for a weekend with some other teachers. And literally, you get me for life. Because that's my commitment back. That I don't care how long it takes, how many sessions you have to come to, you'll never pay another dime. Because I want everybody to get the support they need to achieve their goals. And in terms of the trainings, there's only 4. There's only 4 weekends, and that's it. And everything is, I have been highly selective in creating them. When I first sat down to create the system, I estimated that to teach everybody everything I really wanted to teach them would only take about 5,000 hours. And that was way too long. So I cut it down to about 500, and that was still way too long. And then I cut it down to about 50, 60, and that I think are the most essential. So there's just, 4 short trainings, 2-3 days each, and that's really all you need. Everything beyond that, I have a lot of community. We have weekly practice groups. I give away sessions. I do demonstrations every month. I do multiple Q&A calls and group sessions frequently because I do want to provide that support. I don't want it to be just, pay your money, get your certificate, figure it out. That sucks. I want to be there for people, right? And I'll be here as much or as little as they need because I really want to share this. I want everyone to move into this higher dimensional world, to discover this power. And really the wonderful thing about life is that when you know how to look at it right, you'll find that life is always taking you to exactly the right place. That
it is.
we have our human ideas, right?
Yes.
And life doesn't always take you where you expected it to go, but ultimately it always takes you somewhere better.
It's someplace where you actually need to go.
Yep.
As opposed to where you want to go. Difference. And we're not always conscious of what we need.
That's right. And that's why we all need help. They say a lawyer who represents himself has a fool for a client. I'd say the same goes for healing.
Yeah.
We all need help. We all need support. I mean, I have colleagues that I work with. I pay them, and I do sessions with them all the time.
Sure. It's very difficult to do it for yourself. And I mean, and I've had, through the years, I've had people ask me, well, how come you can't do that for yourself? Well, I'm not quite sure why I can't, but the point is that I can't. It's
just attachment is what it comes down to. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. And
it's hard to get out of your own way. Not impossible, just hard.
Yeah. But I still think sometimes that we actually need to interact with other people to,
we do.
In that case, first of all, it allows us to always keep our mind open.
Yep.
And to look at, maybe I could tweak this a little bit or tweak that a little bit and do this a little differently and do that a little differently. I think that's what keeps us fresh and on target more so when you actually are working with somebody else like that.
Yeah.
I don't give myself readings, that's for sure.
It's hard. And so
and
I don't want anyone hearing to think it's impossible. It's just harder.
It is.
Right? Could you go walk for a mile? Sure. Could you walk for a mile wearing a 50-pound weight vest? Well, that's a lot harder.
Yes, it is.
Not impossible, just harder.
Yes.
So yes, I do teach self-healing. And for easy kind of run-of-the-mill day-to-day stuff, self-healing is great. Another fun story. I was growing up, I loved video games, and it was always my dream to score 1 million points on Pac-Man. But I never achieved that. I'd get to about 200, 250,000, and I just couldn't break through the barrier. And then a few years ago, a Dave & Buster's opened near me, and guess what? They had an original Pac-Man machine. So literally 30 years later, I go back to play Pac-Man, right? And within a couple weeks, I was right back at where I was before, and I just couldn't break through. And so I remember one day I'm sitting at Dave & Buster's, right, waiting for some food, and I realized, oh my gosh, the reason I haven't been able to make my breakthrough is I'm still using my old childhood patterns, literally.
Yep.
So I pulled out my phone, I downloaded some new patterns, and I spent about 5 minutes doing some block clearings on myself. And within 1 week, I scored 1 million points on one credit.
Excellent.
And so that's an example where self-healing was pretty easy there because it wasn't something I was terribly attached to.
Right.
It was just something that would be fun. It was like, this would be fun. This would be cool. I've always wanted to do this. And bingo, I did it.
There you go. Well, we're down to our last 3 minutes. So what I would love for you to do is, and again, we've been placing it in the chat box like crazy. Go ahead and give your website addresses again, and those 2 dates, and then we'll wrap it up from there.
Sure. My website is awakeningdynamics.com. That's awakeningdynamics.com. Just go there. A little box should pop up. Put in your first name and primary email. You'll get my book my book for free, plus invitations to the monthly calls and the webinars. There's a private sessions link for anyone interested in private sessions. And, I encourage everyone that if this resonates with you, go for it. Check it out. that I know that, my style is not for everybody. But I am an engineer, so I teach in a very linear, consistent fashion. I make everything very easy to understand. I did not have any natural talent as a healer or intuitive. All the skill I have is learned. What I do have a talent for, if I have a superpower, it's I can study this really arcane, complex spiritual stuff and make it very easy for people. So that's my mission. I want to make it easy. I want others to have a fast and easy journey where mine was long and hard. Pretty simple.
Well, I think you've done a really good job with it. I'm looking forward to attending. You have a May 3rd for the Healathon, and May 7th is for the.
Let me just look at my calendar so we get the dates right. May 2nd is the next Healathon. That will be next Wednesday.
May 2nd. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be Wednesday. And we are doing the next Wealth Club on the following Monday, on the 7th.
Okay. And what times are those?
We start at 5:30 Pacific.
Okay.
So that'll be 8:30 on the East Coast.
Okay.
And yes, they're recorded, so you can listen later. But I'd say if you're available, it's more fun to be there live. But if you can't, don't worry. Everyone will get emailed replay links too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you. I can't thank you enough for being here with us tonight. I know that a lot of people, you have really charged them up, including myself. So I want to thank you for that. Also want to tell everyone to please don't forget to sign up for my newsletter free of charge right there at journeyswithrebecca.com. And don't forget my book is out. It's on Kindle. The printed version print copies should be available before the end of this week if all goes well. So definitely check that out. The link is either in the chat room or it is also on my website. And I'm looking forward, Brent, to attending your seminars. I truly am, and I can't thank you enough for being here. So for the rest of you, until we meet again, where will your life's journey lead you? Many blessings, everyone, and good night. Good night, Brent. Good night, JP.
Good night, everybody.